when I talk about Christian YouTube, and I'm not really thinking about the YouTubers, because just like with what I said, I very much expect that people who are on YouTube and have really leaned in and now been formed by the algorithm, they have taken this extremism into themselves and have now learned this is what I must do for my job. I was surprised when, well, I'm not real surprised. So, like Jordan Peterson went to Daily Wire. Jordan Peterson made a comment on one of his videos. All these Daily Wire people, what they'd really love to talk about is religion. Well, what they've made their lives, what they've made their fame, what they've made their wealth, what they've made everything on is maybe not so much in religion, although there's a fair amount of religion in Daily Wire, but the politics of it, because that is what's paying the bills. And when I see that, when I see how YouTube is forming the voice of Christianity within this space and forming the people who are voicing these things, I think about that, because when I think about how churches go wrong, it's almost always the perverse incentives, the perverse incentives that, and I think about this for clergy who, again, I talked earlier about my experience with my father was he was never corrupted by the church, but you can be corrupted by the perverse incentives that arise in the church. And sometimes when I look at Christianity on YouTube, I think, I really don't want to see this bleed then back into the church, because the church already wrestles with a variety of perverse incentives. And you know this as a pastor of even a small local church. If I'm honest, because that's the thing about a local church and any real human community, if I'm honest, it's gonna cost me. And integrity is about, I'm going to be honest, and it's going to cost me. And it might even cost my local church. Well, I'm going to take that hit because it's the right thing to do. And so there's my little take on Christian YouTube. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that.
I wrestle with similar tensions in my own channel, and how to be in this space, and how, I think I mentioned this a moment ago, but just to say it again, there's this tension of, on the one hand, I mean, here's the danger in reverse. So the opposite danger would be, I get on YouTube and I just so disregard the algorithms that I just say, I don't care about the algorithms. Who cares? And so my thumbnails are terrible, and I don't use timestamps, and I don't talk clearly. And
You're talking about my channel, but keep going.
Well, add on 10 more things then. Okay. Because you're clearly doing something right.
I am doing something. But you're talking about the balance. You are. Keep going.
So take all those things and put them to the extreme. Okay. So you just don't care. You don't care about reaching people, or touching people. You're just basically just saying, and hey, maybe there's a place for that. Maybe you want to talk to 10 people and just talk, and that's fine. I'm not saying necessarily that would be wrong, but so that's one extreme. So then in the process of moving away from that extreme, then we face this challenging question of, at what point do I cross the line? Right. And it's no longer just sort of mindfulness of best practices, but it's clickbaity. And that is the tough thing. And I'm deeply gripped by a line I heard back at the church, the pastor of the church in Washington, D.C. we were at. He said, what you win them with is what you win them to.
Yep.
And I find that really illuminating. And so then the motivation in my heart from that is to say, okay, if I ever start getting traction because of something that's inauthentic to who I am, now I'm actually, what I'm doing is putting a burden on my shoulders. I'm actually shackling myself to something. I'm becoming a slave to the algorithms. I'm actually it might look like my channel's growing. All right, woohoo! But actually, I'm putting a burden on. I'm putting 30 pounds on my shoulders that I've now got to maintain this because I've attracted people with this, and then there's the pressure. So what I try to do, and I think I do it with a clean conscience. I don't think I'm violating anything major. What I try to do is basically let every video be who I really am and what I would really say if I was in the room with somebody, you know, and not. But there is a tension there because you do have. I actually have grown through being on YouTube. It's helped me see some of my personality eccentricities and some ways in which I need to grow. I could see, wow, I look back on a dialogue I did 3 years ago. I'm like, oh, I was way too nice. I was so overly afraid about giving offense. And so I realized that, okay, I need to crank it up a notch next time. So there's good growth. So then as you're going through the good growth, you need to keep mindful to not go too far. So that's the tension is, you know, be mindful of the best practices and the algorithms. But I think where I land for me is just let it be authentic to who I really feel like God has built me to be in my theology and in my philosophy of ministry and so forth. And that's what I aim for. And I think I don't think I've done any video that I look back on and feel like, oh, I should delete that video or I really crossed a line. But there's things in the area of judgment call where I think you always are wrestling with that. I mean, just recently, you know, someone asked me a question of like, oh, did you see what, I can't remember her name, Pearl something, was saying on Twitter. And it's like, would you ever consider doing a video about that? And I was like, well, you know, on the one hand, I know that that gets traction and views, but on the other hand, I'm not actually naturally already listening to her or interested in her. So I was like, no, I'm not going to go out of my way to learn about something just so I can make a video on it, you know, even if that video would do well. But with what Bill Maher said about abortion that I saw last night, I thought maybe I would do that because I'm really interested in that. I'm really care. I would talk about that over breakfast with my family, or I would talk about that with a friend anyways. So it feels authentic to what I naturally do. So those kinds of things help me think about this. But yeah, I think it's probably always going to be a tension that we wrestle with of, you know, trying to follow the best practices, but also have total integrity in how we go about it.
Yeah.